video, we're going to cover cell fundamentals. We're going to cover the concept of cells, what they are, the common features of cells on Earth, and the different types, comparing prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells. We're also going to break down multicellularity and how the body is organized from specialized cells to organ systems. Let's get started. Alright, so all living things or organisms are built from cells. Cells are the basic structural units of living organisms, and there's a theory called the cell theory, which is one of the fundamental principles of biology. This theory states that all organisms are composed of cells, all cells come from pre-existing cells, and the cell is the smallest living organizational unit. Now, there are different types of cells. We have bacteria, animals, and plants. And we're going to break down all these different types. But before we do, let's go through the common features of cells on Earth. Firstly, all living cells store their hereditary information in the form of double-stranded molecules of DNA, which are long, unbranched, paired polymer chains formed of the same four types of monomers, known as nucleotides. We have A, T, C, and G. Now, a polymer is a long molecule consisting of many similar monomers or subunits that are linked together by covalent bonds, which we'll cover in another lecture. And looking at the building blocks of DNA here, each nucleotide is composed of a sugar phosphate covalently linked to a base. In this case, we have guanine. And then the nucleotides will be covalently linked together into polynucleotide chains. A DNA molecule is composed of two polynucleotide chains or DNA strands that are held together by hydrogen bonds between the paired bases. These red lines are hydrogen bonds. The two strands of the double helix are complementary, which means only certain bases are compatible with each other. Adenine in one strand always pairs with thymine in the other, and guanine always pairs with cytosine. And we're going to break this down in another lecture. With that said, a cell's genome, the entire sequence of nucleotides in an organism's DNA, provides instructions for the cell's and organism's structure, function, and behavior. Another feature, cells can self-replicate, meaning they're able to duplicate their genetic material and other components and then divide into two, producing a pair of daughter cells. The next feature, all cells use proteins as catalysts for almost all the chemical reactions in the cell. And lastly, cells are enclosed in a plasma membrane, which allows nutrients and waste materials to pass in and out of the cell. And it also separates the cell interior from the outside environment. Think of it as the walls of a house, okay? With these common features, there are two different cell types, and they are prokaryotic and eukaryotic. Bacteria and archaea are composed of prokaryotic cells and are known as prokaryotes, whereas plants, animals, fungi, and protists are composed of eukaryotic cells, and they are classified as eukaryotes. Let's draw this out. There are three domains in taxonomy: bacteria, archaea, and eukarya. Taxonomy is the classification of living organisms based on shared characteristics. Prokaryotes are divided into two domains. We have bacteria and archaea, and all eukaryotic organisms are in the third domain called eukarya, and this includes plantae, animalia, protista, and fungi. So organisms whose cells have a nucleus are called eukaryotes, and organisms whose cells do not have a nucleus are called prokaryotes. So now let's subtract complexity and break down prokaryotic cells first. Prokaryotic organisms have a simple cell structure. They are unicellular. They are typically spherical, rod-like, or corkscrew-shaped. Most prokaryotes live as single-celled or unicellular organisms, but some do come together to form chains and clusters. So let's take a look at the structure of a typical prokaryotic bacterial cell. Look at this masterpiece here. Okay, so they have a plasma membrane, which is surrounded by an outer cell wall, and a lot of bacteria actually have a capsule outside the cell wall as well, and this is to protect the cell from damage. Now, a lot of prokaryotes also have flagella, this tail-looking structure that enables them to move freely. And they also have pili, which are these small hair-like projections, which can help with movement as well as the transfer of DNA between organisms. Now, let's go inside the cell here. Prokaryotes lack membrane-bound organelles, but their cytoplasm contains ribosomes. Ribosomes are responsible for the synthesis of proteins. Okay, and the genetic material of prokaryotic cells are called genophore, which is a single circular DNA chromosome contained in an irregular shaped region called the nucleoid. And the nucleoid here doesn't have a membrane. It doesn't have a nuclear membrane like the nucleus of eukaryotes, okay? And many prokaryotic cells also contain these small rings of double-stranded DNA called plasmids. I mentioned before that prokaryotes can be divided into two domains, bacteria and archaea. Bacteria are single-celled organisms. They are microscopic. They are found in environments that are low in salt and moist, environments where there are a lot of organic compounds and sunlight, because they don't require a lot of oxygen to survive. They have several mechanisms of energy production and fixing carbon. They're able to attain energy from sunlight. Bacteria are very important in ecosystems because they break down plant and animal remains and waste. They're also used in food manufacturing and medicine to produce drugs and antibiotics. So that's bacteria. The other type of prokaryotes are archaea, and these include extremophiles, which are organisms that live in extreme conditions, areas of high temperature, areas of low temperature, acidic environments, extremely salty environments, and places where there are no lights. And the reason why they're able to live and exist in such extreme conditions is because of their distinct and unique membranes, which is composed of lipids. Plasma membranes of eukaryotic cells have selective permeability and are fluid in certain temperature range, whereas archaean membrane, it remains permeable and fluid over a wide range of temperatures, extremely cold and extremely hot. So those are prokaryotic cells, and based on what we've just covered, there are several differences between prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells. So let's go through it, and then we'll move on to eukaryotic cell organelles. Starting with the size of the cells, prokaryotic cells are small, bacteria are microscopic, whereas with eukaryotic cells, they are much larger. Now with cell wall, in bacteria, it consists of protein and carbohydrate compound, and in eukaryotes, it's present in fungi, plants, and some protists, and it's mainly carbohydrates and it's cellulars in plants. They both have flagella for movement, and with cell membrane, prokaryotic cells have a bilayer of phospholipid molecules, and they are different. So with archaea, they have a plasma membrane composed of mainly lipids that are fluid and permeable across a wide range of temperatures. With membrane-bound organelles, prokaryotes, they lack membrane-bound organelles, whereas with eukaryotes, they have a lot of membrane-bound organelles. When it comes to chromosomal DNA in prokaryotes, it's in the form of a single-stranded loop located in a region called the nucleoid, but it lacks a membrane, whereas in eukaryotes, the DNA are in the form of linear chromosomes located in the nucleus, which is separated from the cytoplasm by a membrane. Another feature that we looked at are ribosomes. So there are a lot of tiny ribosomes in the cytoplasm in prokaryotes, whereas in eukaryotes, they also have a lot of ribosomes, and it's either attached to the endoplasmic reticulum or it's free in the cytoplasm. Okay, so we've touched on the different types of cells, prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells, and how they are classified into one of three domains: bacteria, archaea, and eukarya. So now let's move on to eukaryotic cells, plants, animals, fungi, and protists. These cells are all different, but they share one common feature, and that is they all contain membrane-bound organelles. These eukaryotic cells have internal membranes that form these specialized membrane-bound compartments within the cell. And there's a name for this. This is known as cell compartmentalization. The benefits of cell compartmentalization is that it allows processes and reactions that require different environments to occur at the same time in the same cell. The membrane-bound compartments within eukaryotes are called organelles, such as the mitochondria and the nucleus, but not all organelles have membranes. The membrane around the organelles control the movement of substance between the organelle and the cell's cytosol. And each of these organelles have very specific structure and function. And we're going to go through all these organelles that are present in eukaryotes in another lecture, okay? In that lecture, we're going to cover cell structure and function and all of the different organelles. But for now, it's to introduce you to these organelles in plant and animal cells. Look at these two here. What a masterpiece, okay? We have plant and animal. Absolutely beautiful. So we have the nucleus, which contains genetic hereditary information, the rough endoplasmic reticulum, which processes and modifies proteins, ribosome, which synthesizes proteins, the Golgi apparatus, which processes and packages proteins, lysosome, digests cellular waste material. We have the smooth endoplasmic reticulum, and this synthesizes lipids. The mitochondria, powerhouse of the cell, and this obtains energy from organic compounds from the oxidation of food molecules such as sugars to produce ATP. Chloroplast in plants uses light energy, carbon dioxide, and water to produce glucose. The centriole, this is involved in cell division, and it's also important in the formation of cell structures such as cilia and flagella. And so then we have cilia, flagella involved in motility. Vacuole stores substances. Peroxisome, this contains enzymes involved in several metabolic reactions. Cytoskeleton, this helps maintain their shape and internal organization. Cell wall, so for cell structure and for the protection of the cell, and plasma membrane. Okay, so we're going to go through these in more detail in another lecture, but comparing plant and animal cells, there are main differences between the two here. First of all, plant cells have cell walls, which are made from cellulose, and the cell wall provides structural support. Animal cells don't have cell walls. Another organelle I mentioned are vacuoles. In plants, they have a large vacuole that stores minerals and nutrients in a solution called cell sap. Vacuole also provides structure to plant cells by maintaining turgor pressure against the cell wall, and in animal cells, they have temporary fluid-filled vacuoles called vesicles. Plant cells also have chloroplast in their cytoplasm and are the site of photosynthesis. Animal cells do not contain chloroplast, and we're going to cover this bad boy in the photosynthesis lecture, which is an incredible process. Okay, so we've covered a lot so far in how cells perform different important functions to sustain life and the different cell types. Let's now break down cell multicellularity and cell specialization in multicellular organisms. Firstly, we have unicellular organisms, single-celled organisms such as prokaryotes, and the single cell performs these functions by itself by the different organelles within the cell. It reproduces asexually or through clonal reproduction, and the whole organism is involved in the reproduction process. And the other type are multicellular organisms. All multicellular organisms consist of eukaryotic cells. Now, in multicellular organisms, the functions that are crucial to sustain life are shared between different types of cells, specialized cells. A multicellular organism contains different types of cells that work together for the survival of the whole organism. The functions are carried out at cellular, tissue, organ, and organ systems level, and we're going to break this down. And reproduction is mostly sexual reproduction, and only reproductive cells will carry out this function, and these are called gametes. Okay, so think about it like a restaurant. Different individuals working together for the survival of the restaurant. We have managers, servers, hosts, bartenders, and even though all these different individuals have different and specific jobs, they all work together for the survival of the restaurant. So with that said, what makes an organism multicellular? So for an organism to be multicellular, its cells, except the reproductive cells, the gametes, must have the same DNA. cells must communicate and cooperate to function as a single organism and have different cells that are specialized and responsible for specific functions and dependent on each other for survival, okay? So how does this work? How does cell specialization and differentiation work? Let's break this down. All multicellular organisms started as a single cell, a zygote, from the fusion of two gametes, the egg and the sperm. And this one cell contains all the genetic information required to develop into a fully functional multicellular organism. Cells are the simplest structural units, and so this single cell is going to divide and it's going to turn into two cells. And these two cells are going to divide, resulting in 4 cells, and so on. The process will just continue. Now, if cell multiplication were the only event that occurs, what's going to happen is we're just going to be creating identical cells. We're going to end up with one huge lump, okay, of identical cells. And we don't want that. We want to create a unique, complex, multicellular organism. And so what happens is, during embryonic development, each cell becomes specialized and performs specific function. An example being generating electrical signals, okay? So the process of turning an unspecialized cell into a specialized cell is known as cell differentiation. Absolutely beautiful, okay? Let's go through this. Embryonic stem cells, which originate in the blastula, make up the primary germ layers. We have the ectoderm, mesoderm, and endoderm. And these germ layers differentiate to form specialized cells, tissues, and organs in animals. And recall that zygote, okay, that the zygote contains all the genetic information to develop into a fully functional multicellular organism. So all the genes, all the information required to produce every type of cell that's needed by an organism are present after fertilization, the fusion of the egg and sperm. And there's a name for this, okay? It's called gene expression. It's the process in which the information stored in genes is used to establish the different structures, cell differentiation, and function. Because in these different specialized cells, only some genes are active or expressed. Okay, so now let's break down how multicellular organisms are organized to help the organism survive, function, and reproduce. It's organized into specialized cells, tissues, organs, and organ systems. Starting with specialized cells, we can classify cells according to the broad types of function they perform. There are 4 major categories. Muscle cells, which are specialized to generate mechanical force. Neurons, a cell of the nervous system that is specialized to initiate, integrate, and conduct electrical signals to other cells. Epithelial cells, specialized for the selective secretion and absorption of ions and organic molecules, and also for protection. Connective tissue cells, which connect and supports the structure of the body. Now, in each of these categories, there are several cell types that carry out variations of the specialized function. For example, let's say in muscle cells, we have skeletal, cardiac, and smooth muscle cells. Each of these cells are different from one another and perform specific function in different locations, but each one is a muscle cell. Okay, now from specialized cells come tissues. Differentiated cells with similar structure and specialized function combine to form tissues. So tissues are groups of similar cells working together to perform a particular function. And we have 4 general types of tissues. Muscle tissue, which consists of cells specialized for contracting, generating tension, and produces movement. Nervous tissue consists of cells specialized for initiating and transmitting electrical impulses. Epithelial tissue consists of cells specialized for exchanging materials between the cell and its environment. And connective tissue, which connects, supports, and anchors various body structures. Now, I quickly want to mention that the term tissue is also used to describe general cellular fabric of any organ, which usually contains all 4 tissue types. So for example, lung tissue. Okay? From tissues, the next organization level are organs. An organ consists of 2 or more tissues that combine and work together to perform particular functions. Examples include the heart, kidneys, and lungs. Then organs work together as organ systems or body systems. The human body has 11 systems. So now let's combine all of these levels and let's use the circulatory system as an example. So for the specialized cell, we'd have the muscle cell, then muscle tissue, which turns into the heart as the organ, then the circulatory system, and finally the organism level. So the body systems are packaged into a fully functional whole body or organism, okay? And that is cell fundamentals. In this lecture, we learned the 3 domains of life: bacteria, archaea, and eukarya, and how prokaryotes are divided into bacteria and archaea, and eukarya includes plants, animals, fungi, and protists. We also broke down the similarities and differences between prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells, and finally, how the body is organized from specialized cells to organ systems. Thank you for watching this video. Make sure you subscribe to EKG Science so you don't miss a single lecture. And remember, subtract complexity and slow down. To study the next lecture, simply click the next video, or you can view the entire playlist. Hey, stop procrastinating!